Something Terrible Came with the Rain by Boris Bacic. Part 5. We didn't have time to think about the monsters branded with the number 36 because the sound came from behind us, from the place where the barricade had previously been. We proceeded carefully past more dead bodies. And then something small ran past us in the dark. Alyssa gestured for me to follow her, so I did. There was nothing around the corner, but we still proceeded carefully. Whoever just ran past us was close by. Another barely audible sound coming from right behind a wheelchair in front of us. Alyssa slowly approached it and then kicked the wheelchair aside. A small boy came into visibility. He screamed and ran past us before we could grab him. "Hey, wait! We want to help you!" I shouted after him, but he didn't listen. He disappeared into one of the rooms, and Alyssa and I wasted no time running after him. "Little boy, where are you?" Alyssa frantically looked around the room. A minute after searching, we found him under a patient's bed. I shone my flashlight and saw his terrified face. He was no older than 6, and he looked like he'd seen more than enough for the next 20 years. "It's okay, we won't hurt you." I knelt down slowly, holding my hand in front of myself. He was panting and his eyes were wide. "Hey, what's your name?" I asked. He still didn't answer. "My name's Alyssa," Alyssa introduced herself behind me. "Where are your parents?" The kid's eyes widened even more and he started backing away. It took me a moment to realize it was not we who scared him. A faint grunting sound came from behind us, and as soon as I turned around, I saw another one of those blobby amalgamations, like the one in the alley, tackling Alyssa to the ground. She held it back with her foot, trying to wiggle out of its reach. I gripped my hatchet firmly and thought for a second about what I should do. Just like the one before, the creature looked very volatile, and I didn't know how dangerous getting close could be. But when I saw how dangerously close it was to reaching Alyssa's face with its deformed fingers, I brought down the hatchet on its back with full force. There was a loud popping sound, and I fell back as something warm and slimy hit my face with unimaginable force. I swiped my hand across the goo on my face and spat it out of my mouth. "Hey, are you okay?" Alyssa helped me up. "Disgusting!" I spat out the rest of the slime from my mouth and cleaned myself off. The monster lay dead sideways on the floor, its back ripped open. "Just find the damn kid," I pushed Alyssa away, still disgusted. I heard her trying to talk to the boy, and little by little, he finally came to trust us and let us approach him. "What's your name?" Alyssa asked. "Dewey," he shyly said, looking at his feet. "Are your parents close by, Dewey?" Alyssa asked him. The kid's face turned red and his eyes glossy. Alyssa hugged him while he cried. A few minutes later, when he calmed down, she pulled back and asked him, "Dewey, how did you get here? Where are the others?" "My mum and dad came here, but there was a fight." "The monsters killed them?" Alyssa asked. Dewey shook his head. "There was a man in black clothes. He and some other people said 36 is good, and other people said 36 is bad, and then they got into a fight. So the man in black and his men killed everyone, including your parents?" Alyssa frowned. Dewey nodded. "Do you know this man's name?" "Martin." "Did they say where they would go?" I asked. "Dad said they couldn't leave the city because the soldiers were bad, so they planned to go to the old mine where 36 was. But when my dad said that they had to get rid of 36, Martin got angry, and that's when he attacked everyone." "The old mine? Why would they go there?" Alyssa asked. "Hey, maybe your father was onto something after all," I smiled. "What else do you remember, Dewey?" Dewey thought for a moment. "Martin told me I could be saved if I went with him, but I didn't want to go. A bad man who was there wanted to hurt me, but Martin said no. So they went there. There really might be something there," I said. "Dewey, how many men were with Martin?" Dewey counted on his fingers for a moment before responding with a simple 6. If we take them by surprise, we could take all of them, I said. Alyssa looked uncertain, so I said, look, chances are all exits out of town are heavily guarded by the military, but if we can get to the bottom of this whole thing, we may be able to undo some of the damage and maybe even survive. She nodded and looked at the kid. Dewey, you'll have to come with us. We'll keep you safe. By the time we got out, the rain was a mere drizzle again. Since the mine was on the other side of town, we took the closest functioning car we could find. To hell with the noise and monsters. I let Alyssa drive. Although we saw monsters on the road, most of them didn't seem to care about us. They'd glance at us and then continue roaming mindlessly, as if they knew they couldn't catch us in the car. You okay, Alyssa? I asked when she got really quiet. Dewey was sleeping in the back by this point. Yeah, she said. Just thinking about my dad. You know, he used to take me to this park right here every weekend when I was a kid. Oh, Harry didn't seem like the gentle type, I smiled. He wasn't, she smiled back. We'd do military drills there, while everyone else played. You wanted to be a soldier ever since you were a kid. Yeah, and I enjoyed every second of it. You know, one time when he wasn't looking during training, I sat on the swing just for fun to take a break. Not a minute later, I fell off and hurt myself. He saw me, and when he approached me, he said, "Baby girl, while you're having fun there, your enemies are training hard, and you're making it that much easier for them to kill you in combat. There's time for fun, but it's not now, because while you're doing something, you need to do it with complete dedication." It helped me during boot camp and after Mum passed. He said it's what helped keep him alive in war too. I wonder if this is a little too much for him though. Harry's tough. He could take down a whole horde of those creatures, I said. After a moment of silence, I spoke up again. You know, my father was never around. Always worked hard to provide for us. Whenever I asked to spend time with him, he said I'll thank him one day for always being busy. And then he died, and I never thanked him for it. I didn't care about his money. I just wanted him to spend time with me. And I never got that. Seems we both got polar opposites, Alyssa said. Yeah. You know, this one time he... I started coughing. You okay? She asked. Yeah, probably just caught a damn cold from all this rain, I said, clearing my throat. Well, don't go getting a fever on me now. We're here, she said. She pulled over in front of a huge fenced-off area which led to the quarry. This place is huge, she said. Where do we even start? I think I got an idea, I said, pointing to one of the signs on the fence. There was an arrow pointing to the right side, and it said, Site 36, this way. Part 6. You should probably stay with Dewey while I scout ahead, I told Alyssa. No way, she disagreed before I even finished my sentence. You'll need my help taking Martin's men down. Listen, I'm just going to go and check. My sentence was abruptly caught off by sudden coughing. I'm gonna scout and come back and soon. Hey, you okay? Alyssa looked at me suspiciously. I'm fine, I said, and cleared my aching throat. What's going on? Dewey said groggily. Sorry to wake you up there, buddy, I said. Listen, Alyssa softly said. We're going to go find the bad men. We need you to stay here, okay? Dewey was less than enthused by this, so Alyssa went on to explain why we needed him to stay quietly in the car while we checked out the mine. After a few minutes of convincing, he finally agreed when Alyssa told him that his job is to keep the car safe, deeming it as an extremely important task. We'll be back soon, okay? I told him and smiled reassuringly. As soon as we closed the car doors behind us, Alyssa took point and carefully proceeded on the old dirt road leading to the quarry. The place seemed to be deserted, not counting the dozens of dead bodies of both humans and monsters. The rain still wasn't letting up, and my guess was it wouldn't for a long time. We followed the arrow signs to 36 until we started hearing faint noises in the distance. The cacophony of screams, growls and moans was definitely coming from numerous monsters, but we couldn't see in the dark where they were. We followed the only remaining path to Site 36, with the noise getting louder and louder. We finally reached an opening, and it didn't take us long to realise we were at the edge of the quarry itself. The noise was coming from the direct centre, and when we looked in that direction, we gasped. Hundreds, no, thousands of monsters were converging atop each other like a huge swarming pile, monsters of all shapes and forms, forming a nightmarish abomination of a mountain. Although a lot of the stray ones looked in our direction, they didn't seem concerned about us, but we tried not to make any sudden moves nevertheless. "Look, entrance 36, Alyssa pointed at the distance. "Looks like we'll have to go around them," I said. "I don't think they'll hurt us, but let's be really careful and keep our distance." I took point this time, and just as I predicted, the monsters weren't aggressive, despite making eye contact with us. Still, we proceeded carefully around the horde, keeping as far away as we could from the big pile. The mountain of monsters was a lot bigger and louder than I thought when we got closer to it, and it became clear that the monsters were constantly falling and climbing and falling, over and over and over. Entering the dark mine, labelled as 36, felt claustrophobic, but also relieving to leave the army of monsters behind. "Carefully," Alyssa whispered, pointing her torch in front of us. The mine was pretty straightforward, and we ran into no trouble until we heard the voices, that is. "Wait, you hear that?" I perked up my ears.
"Bring him forward."
A deep voice echoed through the mine.
"No, please. I never questioned you, Father. Please."
Another voice pleaded. Alyssa and I peeked around the corner and saw a group of men standing in an open area in front of a big tunnel. Two of the men were tightly holding a third one who was struggling.
"You have sinned, my child, but you can still be saved,"
the deep voice said again. It was a priest. That was definitely Martin.
"Father, please,"
the man pleaded, but before he could say anything more, Martin slid a shiny blade across his throat. The man fell over with a gurgling sound, clawing at his throat and bleeding to death within seconds. Martin raised his arms high up and shouted,
"Glory be to 36, Saviour of our world."
The men around him did the same. I counted the men surrounding him. Aside from Martin, there were 4 other men, all of them armed with assault rifles. "We can take them," Alyssa whispered. I nodded, and just as we were about to jump out and start shooting, another voice shouted,
"Father Martin, we found an intruder outside our holy grounds. He's the one from the hospital."
Father Martin looked down at the new prisoner and chuckled before saying,
"Well now, it would seem you have changed your mind about coming here, have you not, Dewey?"
My heart jumped into my throat when I glanced there and realised they had a little boy as a prisoner. Dewey stared at Martin, visibly frightened, but not wanting to show the priest.
"Luckily, we have just the job for you in a few days,"
Martin continued.
"Take him to the source, lock him up, and keep a close eye on him."
Before I realised what was going on, Alyssa jumped in front of our enemies and started shooting them with an expression of pure anger on her face. Without any time to think, I joined in, and in the frenzied shootout we managed to take down all but one of Martin's men, who fled into the dark tunnel ahead. My shoulder got grazed by a bullet in the shootout, but I was not seriously injured. "Martin, come out, you bastard!" Alyssa took a few steps forward cautiously. Out of nowhere, he jumped out and shot Alyssa in the leg while standing behind Dewey, then pointing the gun to his head. "Not a step closer, or the child dies, Martin said. I held my gun trained on him, not sure what I should do. Shoot him, Alyssa shouted. I would have done it too, but all of a sudden my vision became blurry and I got dizzy, coughing violently. I felt myself falling to my knees and saw blood coming out of my mouth with each cough. Everything was getting dark. Father Martin, are you okay? More men rushed to Martin's side, pointing their guns at Alyssa and me. Should we throw them in the pit? One of them asked. No, Martin said while standing over me. They're as good as dead anyway. The next few hours were blurry. I fell in and out of consciousness, and I remember seeing an unfamiliar face, a scientist of some sort. I felt being carried, and I remember seeing a bright room. Sometime later, I woke up. It took me a while to adjust, but when I did, I shielded my eyes from the bright ceiling light. I looked around and realized I was in some sort of lab. A man in a white coat sat on the other side of the room by a PC, typing away. Various vials and incubators of sorts with unfamiliar organs were on the desk around the room. I shuffled on the bed and started coughing violently. Breathe, breathe. The man in the white coat was next to me before I even knew it. Who are you? I asked. My name is Dr. Andrew. I work in this lab. Lab? An electronic door opened and a woman with a crutch waltzed in. Finally awake, Alyssa smiled. Her leg was wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage where she had been shot. Alyssa, what happened? They took Dewey. I think they planned to sacrifice him. Dr. Andrew saw us on the surveillance cameras and took us into the lab. The government had this whole underground facility set up to study 36. Where's the kid now? I asked. They took him all the way deep into the heart of 36, Andrew said, to where the monsters are emerging from. Then we need to go save him. I stood up on wobbly legs, trying to steady myself. Alyssa sat down with a serious expression on her face. The doc stared at me with concern too. What? I asked. There's something you should know, Alyssa looked down. Back when you saved me in the hospital, when you killed that volatile creature. There was a long pause. Well, what is it? My heart was racing and my body trembling. I'm afraid you're infected, Andrew finally spoke up. The good news is it's not contagious and it doesn't turn you into one of those creatures. It seems to be a new form of bacteria which we've never seen before. So here comes the bad news. Once infected, the bacteria attaches itself to the lungs of the host and... Save the bullshit, Doc, I said quietly. How long do I have? It's hard to say. Judging by the progress of the bacteria, I'd say less than a week. I chuckled, unable to process what I was hearing. After a long pause, I said, You said they took Dewey all the way deep, right? Alyssa interjected, You can't be serious. You can't. I'm the only one who can save him, damn it. I tried not to yell too much since my chest was burning. You can't do it with that leg of yours, so it has to be me. I have to do this one last thing before I die. Part 7. Although the lab was enormous and had lots of staff, Andrew was the only one who managed to survive. He explained that when the alarm went off, all the military personnel went to secure the source on Site 36, but perished. Andrew had no choice but to initiate full lockdown. So what exactly is 36? I asked. Well, Andrew started. It all began as an accident. Some miners were going about their business, and one day they dug through to this hidden cave system, so to say, which further led them down to a huge, seemingly bottomless hole. Now, at first it was just an interesting tourist attraction, but then people reported hearing voices coming from down there. And then the first accident happened. You remember that little girl that disappeared a few years back? Katie Chandler? Alyssa interjected. Yeah. The official story was she just went missing during a field trip to the cave with her school, but in reality, she fell down the hole. Well, dragged down is more accurate. Wait, the teacher who took the class on the field trip claimed there was no way she fell inside the hole, I said. Andrew nodded. Yeah, as soon as the incident happened, the teacher was bribed and threatened by the government. The kids' stories of monsters were, of course, dismissed. We had our eyes on this place for a while as a precaution, but only after we saw Katie getting dragged down there were our suspicions confirmed. After that, the military quarantined the zone. Our lab was set up here, and we have been studying the hole ever since. The public was told the area was closed off due to police searching for the missing girl. But something went wrong, Alyssa asked. Monsters occasionally kept emerging from the cave. We tried investigating the hole, but it was impossible. It was as if a completely different world was down there. And then they stopped coming out altogether. But the government wanted to know more about them, so they set up a special machine to draw them out. They created a link with the world down there via a machine. Let's call it a portal. But they underestimated the monsters, and soon thousands of them poured out of the portal and were set loose on the city. So what about the rain? Interestingly enough, as the rain increases, so does the activity in the portal. We still don't know how they are connected, but one thing is for sure: the heavier the rain, the more dangerous they are. Doc, on our way here, the creatures outside were merging onto a big pile, and they weren't hostile towards us, I said. Yes, the creatures seem to be operating in hive-like mind manner, and whatever is controlling them seems to be coming from the source, the portal. We believe they have a queen, or something like that. So how do we stop them? Your best bet is to destroy the machine. It's very fragile, so a few bullets should do it. But that still leaves the monsters outside, Alyssa said. Andrew nodded. Yes, and if the machine is destroyed, there may be a number of residual monsters coming out of the hole, the ones that managed to get into our world before the connection is severed. And chances are the government will nuke the city to prevent it from spreading. But if we close the portal, the monsters may get confused without the connection to their leader. I can then contact HQ, and they may conduct a full sweep and rescue mission. What are those creatures anyway? I asked. Well, we don't know exactly. Our research team believes they were dormant for centuries, and those miners woke them up when they dug up their sanctuary. We studied a few specimens, but we still barely know anything about them. There was a long silence. Well, time for me to go. I stood up. Wait, take this. Andrew went to his desk and returned with a box of pills. It will suppress the bacteria, but only for a very short time. Take one every hour and no sooner. This strain is highly adaptive and can develop resistance within days. Thanks, Doc. My mind was on autopilot, and I tried not to think about the fact that my time on this earth was limited. Alyssa stood up with the help of her crutch and opened her mouth to say something, but I could tell she had no idea what to say. There was nothing she could say to ease the situation. Don't worry, I said. I'll bring him back, and then you need to keep him safe. I will, I promise, she said with glossy eyes. I coughed painfully and then said to her, You know, I planned on asking you out on a date once all this was done. Despite being a stubborn bitch, I think we'd get along. If you weren't so ugly, I'd say yes, she said, and we both laughed. I stared at the ground and then looked at her in the eye. If I'm not back soon, you'll have to go on alone. She didn't respond. The doctor escorted me out of the lab. He gave me an assault rifle which belonged to one of the soldiers and told me how to reach the source where the machine was. The lab itself was hidden behind a fake wall which could be raised and lowered, so that explained how the dock stayed safe this whole time. I stepped outside and turned back to the dock. If you make it back, I'll see you on the camera feed and open the passage for you. Good luck, Andrew said, and pushed the button which lowered the fake wall back down, leaving me in the empty mine. Hold on, Dewey, I said to myself and started walking. I soon reached the area where we first saw Father Martin, and from there I went inside the dark tunnel ahead. It slowly descended, and as it did, the air got colder, until I could see my breath in the air. After I started having a coughing fit, I popped one of the pills and continued, trying to steady my breath. I felt fatigue taking me over, so I knew I was almost out of time. When I descended to the bottom, I started seeing lights from torches on the walls. As I continued, the rock walls and floor changed into a metallic corridor. I followed the only path ahead of me until I heard voices in front. It was a mixture of adult and child voices. I hurried up and saw in front of me a huge area with a tall ceiling and an enormous hole in the ground. The hole was glowing brightly and looked like it had a sort of whirlpool in it. On the other side of it was a big generator-like machine. This was definitely the place I was looking for. I arrived just in time to see Martin and his men throw a woman into the hole. Her scream was abruptly cut off when she fell inside the vortex, which became turbulent before calming down again. "Praise be to 36, Martin raised his arms and shouted. The men around him repeated the phrase 3 more times. "Now, Dewey," Martin turned towards the kid. "Your role is at hand. You will perform a great deed here." "Fuck you," Dewey spewed at Martin, making him and a few other men chuckle. "Come now." Martin pushed Dewey towards the hole and stepped back. Dewey fell near the edge on his hands and knees and stared at the vortex, which started to become violent again. I aimed my gun at the generator. It was far away, but I was confident I could hit it. Black tentacles started to emerge from the hole and slithered their way towards Dewey as a deep groan echoed from the hole itself all around the cave. Without any time to think, I pulled the trigger. The bullets hit the machine with a loud clank, and the sound of electrical shocks filled the air. The vortex in the hole disappeared just like that, and the tentacles writhed, severed on the ground, purple blood oozing out of them. The deep groan from before turned into a scream of agony, and the cave began to shake. "No, what did you do?" Martin shouted. Multiple screams came from the now dark hole, and monsters started to emerge. They wasted no time pulling Martin's men into the hole or slaughtering them on sight. Most of his men had already escaped, some deeper into the cave, and others ran past me, ignoring me in their panic. "Come back, you cowards!" Martin shouted as screams echoed around him. "Dewey, come on!" I shouted in the whole mess, and the boy started running towards me. A thin creature with sharp claws and teeth pursued him on all fours, and just as it leapt to grab him, I shot the creature and knocked it backwards. It didn't move again. "Come on!" I pushed Dewey forward, and we both ran as quick as our legs and the shaking ground allowed us to. We ran unsteadily through the tremors, and I heard cave-ins behind us. My chest was on fire, and I was already out of breath. "Dewey, run," I said between breaths, and continued staggering. And then I felt a powerful force knock the air out of me. I dropped the gun and fell on my side. "You'll pay for that," Martin said as he punched me over and over. He then put his hands around my throat and started choking me. "You ruined everything," he said, squeezing so hard that my vision got darker by the second. "I'll kill you for what you've done." I raised my hand and punched Martin at the forearm as hard as I could, making his grip loosen. I then coughed up some blood in his face and kicked him away from me with the remaining strength. I turned around on my stomach and started crawling towards the gun on the ground. "No, you don't," Martin said from behind me, and I felt myself getting dragged back by the feet. I turned around to see him holding a big rock above his head. I raised my hands in defense, and a loud bang ensued. Martin dropped the rock and a large red stain appeared on his chest. He stared at me in disbelief before finally falling down dead. "Rotten hell, you piece of shit," Alyssa said, holding the gun, with Dewey behind her. "Come on, let's go," she said, and helped me up as much as she could with her bad leg. Screams started to fill the air again behind us. We ran back inside the lab, and Andrew closed the secret passage just in time for the monsters to slam into the impregnable wall. I fell on my knees, coughing violently. When I finally stopped, I felt weaker than ever, so much so that I could barely stand. I lay on the bed while Andrew contacted HQ via radio. A few minutes later, he got a response and the military confirmed they would eliminate the remaining monsters and perform a search and rescue immediately. "You did it," Alyssa told me as she held my hand, but I couldn't respond since I fell out of consciousness. I woke up some time later on the same bed. Alyssa and a bunch of doctors were around me. "Good, he's stable," one of them said. "Is he going to be okay?" Alyssa asked. I looked around and saw military people talking to Andrew and more doctors walking around the lab. "If we had arrived a few minutes later, he would have been dead," the doctor said. "He can never be rid of the infection, but the bacteria will remain dormant as long as he takes the medication. You'll have to keep a close eye on him, and if there's even the slightest change..." "I know. I'll take care of him," she said. The doctors left and Alyssa sat next to me with a big smile and squeezed my hand. "Hey, you hear that? You'll be all right." I closed my eyes and squeezed back. There was no news coverage about the incident, and all rescued survivors were forced to sign an NDA about the whole deal under the threat of incarceration and even execution. The official story reported was that there was a virus outbreak which has since been contained, despite the numerous casualties. Months later, I live a normal life, albeit with a lower lung capacity. Dewey lives with his aunt now, but Alyssa and I make sure to visit him every week. Everyone else seems to be back to living their old, mundane lives too, and no one talks about the rain incident. One thing still bothers me though. Whenever it rains, I always hear something when I'm home. Something that puts me on edge and takes me back to the day when the whole incident started. Something that's always just loud enough for me to hear, no matter what I'm doing or where I am in the house. The unmistakable sound of footsteps splashing in my backyard. I just want to thank the author, Boris Bacic, for allowing me to narrate this story. That was parts 5, 6 and 7 of this 7-part story. If you like this type of story, the author has a range of books available on Amazon right now, so I highly encourage you to support the author if you can. I'll leave a link for their Amazon page in the description below. I'll also leave a link for the original story in the description below if you wanted to go over to Reddit and show them some love. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare.